We are going to run through installing Terraform. So while you all are getting your environments up, let's just step back and talk about what Terraform is. Who here is already somewhat familiar with Terraform? And if you are, how would you describe it in your own words?
Uh, I have a little bit of experience. It's just like it's like a document that you can fill out that will create, sorry, cloud resources. So like Azure, AWS, um, and you can configure them inside of the document, like kind of the way you want them to connect and whatnot. So that's about all I know about it. And then I think there's a few commands where you can kind of check the status of your resources as well. But that's pretty much all I know.
Okay. All on the right, all correct so far. Let's also throw in maybe some more conceptual questions like why. Let's start with asking, does infrastructure as code mean anything to anyone here?
Heard of it before. I just don't know what it is.
Okay.
Same thing with Terraform.
Instead of using the AWS GUI, you just write code and it'll build it for you.
Yes. Yes. And why would we want to do that?
You can have a batch of code or whatever and easily, what do you call it, deploy it over and over again.
Exactly. Yes. Being able to recreate the same resources with the same configurations over and over and over again is a good practice because that gives A, standardization, B, reliability, and it allows for a way for other engineers on your team or on other teams to very easily see what you're seeing, right? It will live inside of a repository, so they could just hop onto whatever branch you're working on and have code reviews, et cetera, et cetera. There are probably several other reasons why it is beneficial. Those what you hit on were is probably very key, just that standardization, right? And if you have your configurations already made ahead of place, it's easier to just pick up and go wherever you left off. And let me actually just pull up my VS Code and or instead of that, I'm gonna show you all this, kind of have some some instances running. So you see demo web server up twice. Let me bring this over. These are resources that I had just created today. And if I want to delete them, I'm just going to run Terraform destroy. And now we're running some Terraform. And it's telling us what it's doing as it goes. And while we're waiting for that, this is some of what the Terraform outputs are going to look like. It repeats a lot of the Terraform that you actually write out yourself and essentially just confirms it for you that these are the changes that are going to be made. So like there's already built-in version control, right? If your resources already exist, you could also just change certain values in them just by updating your Terraform file and rerunning it. And again, in the output, it will show you all of the changes being made. Yes, Julio?
Is this only specifically to AWS or is Terraform for like any type of cloud environment?
Yeah, Terraform is for essentially any type of cloud environment, which is why I think it's one of the more popular platforms out there. It supports Oracle, Azure. Google Cloud, and even VMs. Like it doesn't just support cloud architecture, it supports really a wide range of platforms or infrastructures that you
So
may.
architecture as code is what it does for any, not any platform, but for like the major players right now. It's like that's its thing. It's like its robustness is infrastructure as code, period.
Exactly. Yes. Yes.
Nice.
There is like still naming conventions that apply only for AWS and then, Azure and things like that, right?
Yeah. Naming conventions are going to be essentially unique to every platform. And while there may be similarities, it's all really going to boil down to how that platform just does things. And so I think this is why, they say being an engineer is like 80% reading documentation. Maybe for DevOps engineers, it's a little more, like 90%. Yeah, it's just that's just how it is. But if you have an idea of how the platform works, then you'll have an idea of what resources to create, right? Because like there's a little one-to-one um, parallel between how you would be creating things inside of a UI and how you'd be writing them inside of your Terraform. So far, for example, we've built an EC2 that would use security groups and um, roles, policies, optionally IAM users, a VPC with subnets, routers, and internet gateways. All of those things can be created inside of Terraform. So, okay, let's go back to our browser now. Let's refresh, and we could see that we're down to 2 resources because we just destroyed the other one. I'm going to now just run Terraform apply, and we'll see it pop back up. And rather than having to go through the UI to change all of these individual things, like selecting the image, selecting which instance I want to use, enabling certain configurations, like exposing the public IP, I could just do it all in one command. I could even have outputs of what is created in case I need to use this somewhere else. So that's the power of Terraform. Let's refresh this. Let's take a look at our EC2. It's back up to 3. It's still initializing. And that's essentially just how you run a Terraform configuration. Running the commands is probably the easier part of Terraform. And really, there's essentially only 2 parts to Terraform, right? There's writing the configuration files and then running them. So what does a configuration file look like? It's going to look exactly like this. And as you can see, we have configurations for what you would expect from that resource, right? But let's rewind a bit. Every block of code here is, you can think of it as a resource. There are different kinds. This resource keyword is probably the one that you're going to use the most. It allows you to write a new resource. So an AWS security group, it's going to have certain parameters required, but there are also going to be optional parameters that you may not necessarily need. So it's a good idea to keep documentation handy for whenever you're writing resources that you don't know about. But essentially everything you need to know is available online, right? The challenge is in making sure to check all the boxes because I think one of the frustrations with Terraform is maybe realizing that you missed something or having resources not point to one another correctly. So there are some pain points as you can expect with anything in life. But one of the things that you can do to make it easier is to be ready to reference documentation. And when you're referencing documentation, be mindful of certain things like versions, right? Um, like here, we actually see that this link took us to a very old version, and that may not be the version that we're using. This is a very simple config, so it's not specifying the version. Let me see if I have one handy that is. For what file it's in. Right? You can specify the version of Terraform that you're using, and that's one of the things you're going to want to pay attention to when you are looking up documentation. So in my case, I cannot find a good example, so we'll just find one online. Terraform, box provider, version. Okay, so AWS provider is one of the resources, and what it does is it allows you to specify the providers. If we're making everything for AWS, then we specify AWS as a required provider, and we specify what library of Terraform magic working with AWS that we want to use, right? So this version should align with the version that we're reading about. Other things you could define in the provider would be the region. And if you provide this in your provider block, then all of your Terraform will utilize that region unless you specifically instruct it to do otherwise. So this VPC that gets created here will be using default values and values that have already been set before, like this region. And then we're just manually specifying things that aren't um, set already, like the CIDR range. So that's a big part of Terraform, just being able to find the resources to help you build your own resources, right? So that's what a resource is. That code block is essentially what you're going to work with the most because that's what allows you to create new resources. But what if you want to work with an existing resource? There may be cases where your configuration will fail if you try to create a resource because it already exists. It does boil down to like the resource itself. S3 buckets, for example, have unique names, and so you won't be able to create a new S3 bucket if you're trying to create one with a name that's already been created. And if you're trying to access that S3 bucket, you use the keyword data. Okay, so those are some, yeah, the two keywords that we're going to use the most, data, resource. I guess maybe provider, like that should always be there, but that's really only going to be in your main.terraform file. And what is a main.terraform file? When you write your Terraform, you're likely going to have everything inside of a directory because every Terraform file within a directory gets run together. And so you could separate the different requirements for your infrastructure into different files, right? Just to stay organized, just to make it easier to track. Everything related to my EC2 will be in this file, in this configuration. Everything related to policies and roles can live in here. And this is just good practice because when you're working with other engineers and other teams, it has to make sense in a way that anyone can just come in and interpret it and understand the way that it's supposed to be understood. Locals is, oh, before we move on, naming conventions. I just happen to use the naming conventions we use at my employer. I'm sure when you run examples with the other instructors, they may have different naming conventions. It's not really important what names you use. It just has to make sense to you and whoever you're working with. And having consistency between you and who you work with is good too. But really, like, this Terraform isn't going to fail if you name these all sorts of crazy random things. Okay, so as long as all the Terraform files are within the same directory, they will run together when you run commands like Terraform plan or Terraform apply. You'll go over the commands in more detail tomorrow, and I think that repetition will be good. There really aren't too many of them. The basic flow is going to be Terraform init to initialize a directory, Terraform plan to just confirm that your configuration is good, and then Terraform apply with Terraform validate as being maybe an optional step in between. So that is Terraform in a nutshell. Okay, we have more on infrastructure as a code conceptually and with Terraform as well. And we have them in this assignments folder. So one of the challenges today is to just read through these. These will talk about some of the things that we've already started to discuss during today's lesson. And it's just doing so in much more detail. Same with Terraform concepts. This will help you get a broader, big picture understanding of some of these commands and how they work. Tomorrow, you will learn about the configurations in more detail. So you'll be learning more about the syntax. And you'll also be learning about the commands. So you'll learn, again, things like validate, things like apply. What else? Then we'll cover variables and meta arguments like using count and for each and variable. So like now this should start to look a little similar to like the fundamentals of software engineering, right? We're learning about the basic fundamental ways to manipulate data. Just in this case, we're working with configurations. So if we were supposed to write, for example, a bunch of different users using the same role, it doesn't make sense to just create a bunch of different resources, right, with different names. It makes more sense to programmatically create these resources using loops and conditionals. And then locals, variables, and outputs. There are slight differences between these things, such as like where in the flow they are run, how they're accessed. You'll go over the nuances of these later on. And then we will talk about data sources and remote state on Saturday. And if it's a lot to throw at you in 1 week, especially since you're still doing your assessments, next week we're just going to go over it again, just with more challenges, and we're just going to step up the amount of things we're going to configure each day. Sound good? Cool. Okay. Now, oh yeah, let's go ahead and install Terraform. So, yes, you all should have your environments open. It's kind of been a while since I've done this because I've had it on my system for so long now. Okay, so there's going to be a link here that will show you how to install Terraform based on your operating system. So for Mac users, going to use the very handy dandy brew to install. Windows users can just download it, and Linux, you users get to use all your verbose command sequences. Okay. Where are y'all at? Let's take a moment to do this right now. So if you haven't run your brew command or haven't downloaded the file, just let's get started doing that right now. And
Are
let's
we downloading this on our actual devices, not our Windows subsystem Linux or any dish like that, just on our computer?
I would say
Both?
out of your subsystem, because if that's where you've been, like forking down your repositories and that's where you have the curriculum, then that's where you should be installing it so that you could run Terraform commands from there.
Okay.
Okay. And I know so far we haven't really been using a lot of GitHub to push solutions, but we don't want you to forget how to do all of that either. So we're going to do more of that in these challenges moving forward. When it comes to Terraform, you'll be pushing your Terraform configurations. We'll also be working with, we'll be learning with, yeah, from here on out, we're mostly working with configurations. AWS is a unique module in the sense that because it's so lab oriented, there's not really much to push. I think in the future, at least one of my goals is to update a lot of the challenges so that students have to write and push documentation and architecture diagrams. But that's a story for another day. You all are past the AWS module, essentially. So from here on out, you can push your configuration files in Terraform, your Docker files in Docker, your GitHub action workflows for GitHub actions, and your Ansible inventories and playbooks for Ansible. Okay. Where are we at with the installation? Is anyone having any issues? Anyone running into conflicts or anything?
Nope, seemed pretty straightforward.
Nice. Okay. Let's do a quick lab then. So let's make, let's make, I don't know, any kind of directory. Where do I want to do this? Oh, I'll just do it here. I'm going to make a new directory, my Terraform project. And we are going to create a very standard EC2. So now that I'm in my Terraform directory and I have Terraform installed on my local machine, I'm just going to go ahead and make a new file, main.tf. Okay. In my main.tf, one of the first things we're going to want is a provider. So let's type provider. We're using AWS. So let's write AWS. And let's specify a region. Now I'm going to continue to use US East 1. Use whichever region that we're allowed to use that you want. So either East 1, East 2, or West 2. And now I can go ahead and save. And I can actually probably run Terraform init already. Bam. Yeah, so do this as well. Save your file, your very simple 3-line file, and run Terraform init. You should see these kind of messages and that you confirm that you've got Terraform working on your system. When you run Terraform init, what it's really doing is it's creating a lot of necessary files. So it's similar to how inside of Python you would run pip install requirements -r, or in JavaScript you'd be, when you're working with React, like npm install Vite or whatever you're working with, we're initializing our directory, our project directory. So if we take a look at all of our hidden files, we'll see that we've got a Terraform directory now, a Terraform lock. This is where state is essentially handled right now. Okay, so you don't want to delete this. Later on, we'll learn how to store this file in a remote location. And that's useful for if you want to work with other people, right? You could have different engineers or different engineer teams on different directories in this DynamoDB table. You'll cover that in more detail later on. This Terraform directory is all just Terraform related magic. You don't ever have to go into these two directories. I'm just letting you know that this is what happens when you run Terraform init. And I'm also want to let you know that if you're creating a bunch of projects and you're not deleting all of your Terraforms, you might want to delete some of your old Terraforms because the size will build up. It's not exactly like a lot of space that gets used up, but it does add up. It's not like small and menial either. It's a decent amount. So if you want to keep your Terraform directory without all of the files that make it a lot bigger, you could just keep the configurations and delete your Terraform and Terraform lock. So in that kind of use case, if you just wanted to keep your configurations, but get rid of the state and the files that are taking up space, in that case, you'd want to delete these. Okay. So we have initialized our Terraform project. Now we can keep adding on to it. So one of the
How do we check again if we have Terraform successfully installed?
run a Terraform init. Like that's going to be the very first thing you're going to do in a new Terraform project. And there may be cases where you'll have to run it again, like if you mess something up and then you have to like reinitialize. So it's safe to run Terraform init like as many times as you want. It's really just going to be updating the files inside of these two directories. I guess I should say it's generally safe. I'm sure there's going to be edge cases where you might unintentionally overwrite some kind of change or state that you had made before, but that's a very complex use case that you may not run into for a while. So let's not worry about that right now. Is there anyone who can't run Terraform init? Cool. All right, now we can continue writing more Terraform. We want to create an EC2 instance. So let's create a new resource because everything we provision is essentially a resource. And this first argument that you're passing in is the name of the resource. So if we want to create an EC2 for AWS, it's going to be AWS underscore instance. So Terraform AWS EC2. In our documentation, we see that this provides an EC2 instance resource. It allows for the creation, update, and deleting of EC2s. Notice how in this example, they're using data instead of resource. That's referencing something that already exists instead of trying to provision it. And some of the things you'll want to pass into your resource. The next argument, for example, is going to be a name. So I'm going to name this demo2. And then you open up your curly brackets and we write some requirements. One of the main things you're going to want to reference is an AMI. That's your image. It is region specific. but it's also fairly easy to find. So I'm inside of US East 1 where I want to be. I'm going to go over to EC2, and there's this very handy AMI catalog here. And this is where I could look up the different images that I want. In my case, if I wanted to use Amazon, let's use Ubuntu. Let's use Ubuntu as an example. If I want to do Ubuntu, then I just search for Ubuntu. And now it's going to tell me a lot of what it would tell me if I were making this EC2 in my UI, right? It's telling me like it's free tier eligible. What else? That's about all that I'm really concerned with right now. Okay, so now I can just grab this AMI, I'm gonna copy it, and I'm gonna toss that into this configuration. Okay. Next, I'm gonna specify an instance type, and I might want to double check that the instance I want to use is compatible with whatever image I'm selecting. So I think if I select this, it should give me the option. Could either launch or, yeah. Okay, so I see that T2 micro is supported. It's also free tier eligible. So I'm going to go ahead and type T2 micro. Okay. And I'm going to finish this keyword because it's actually instance type. If you're not seeing this squiggly that tells you that you made a mistake, then you'll probably want to install a VS Code extension. And we could use the official Terraform HashiCorp extension. That's the one I use. So install this, and this will lint and run through your code as you create it to point out any errors or mistakes to you. So trying to write Terraform without this is like driving blind or something like that. You won't be able to tell when you're making something that's not going to work or not. Okay. So it's telling me it doesn't like instance. So I'm going to correct it by typing instance type and see what else. I'm just going to add some tags. So MO2, C2. I'm also, give me one sec, need to grab one of my aliases that I forgot. Always forget my aliases. Oh, what I'm trying to reference right now is, oh, I have to switch my AWS profile. I mean, I guess I don't have to. I'll go ahead and run this. Terraform plan. So after you do an init and you create your resources, your configurations, you're going to want to run a Terraform plan. And that will let you know if there's anything that looks wrong. And it's going to also give you an output of what you can expect to see. So in this case, it's telling me that an EC2 will be created. It's going to give me the details that it knows, and it's going to let me know if I'll get that information afterwards. So I could expect an ARN, I can expect a host ID and an IP address. So it's good to go. It's telling me that I have one resource I can add. So now if I run Terraform apply, it will apply my Terraform and it will prompt me. Okay. So now if we go into our AWS, we can see that it has been created. Got my I guess it's this one. Oh, I didn't set the name, right? Let's see. Yeah. But this new one, it's being created. And if we wanted to have some security, we see that we have some rules already attached to it. But what if we wanted to modify those rules? Then we would have to write some configurations to do that. So the next thing we're going to do is write a security group resource. So let's look up how to do that because maybe we don't remember. And I just happen to have this open, which is nice. Yikes, clicking on the latest version just takes you to the root of that. So I'm going to have to look for security group again. And I don't think that's what I want. There we go. That's what I want. AWS security group. It's going to tell me any notes or warnings. And I'm going to either listen to them or ignore them. And then I'm going to see how to configure my resource, or in this case, my security group. So just like before, we're passing in that keyword, and then we want to name it whatever we want to name it. So resource security underscore group. I already messed it up. It's AWS underscore security group, not ASS. And I'm going to name this demo2 SG for security group. Open my curly brackets. If I want to name it, I'm going to name it. And at this point, it might just be handy to have both windows up simultaneously. So, got a name. S, or actually, I was going to name it this. Oh, cool. I just remembered something. So, if we were to name this differently, I want to see it complain. I think I just realized something. Am I in the right directory? I am, right? Okay. My Terraform project. Save Terraform plan. Okay, so I guess that looks right. It's saying it can add one, which is going to be the security group. And I want to add some other stuff like a description. This is security group, or actually something that might make more sense. It's to specify what the security group is supposed to do. Allowing SSH, HTTP, S. That's my more logical description. And now I could also reference a VPC ID. And we've talked about how when you create an EC2 in AWS, it utilizes the default VPC by default. And if we want to do that, we can do data.aws.vpc.default ID. And it's going to complain at some point, I hope. And we can, for now, just continue creating some of our required configurations. So your ingress, that's going to be your inbound routes. And in this case, just like you remember from what is it called? The UI, the AWS console, we're specifying certain things, right? Like the word that we're exposing. In this case, or SSH, we want to use port 22. And our protocol, and then our CIDR range, we're going to use that 0.0.0.0 so that we can have traffic coming from anywhere. Okay. Now, I need to do this a few more times. I'm just going to copy paste this. And I'm just going to change these ports. We need 440, sorry, no, we need 80 for HTTP and then 443 for HTTPS. So now this looks good. Gonna add some tags if I haven't already. I have not. And I'm just gonna give it another name. All right, how are we all doing? Right, Terraform plan, and I'm hoping it's gonna yell at me. Yes, it's yelling at me. So this is saying a data resource APC under AWS underscore VPC default has not been declared in the root module. And it's specifically telling me a data resource because that's what I'm calling. One thing you'll realize about syntax is it might seem intimidating at first having to try to remember all of this, but it's essentially just dot notation. If we were to create a resource for a VPC, and if I don't remember off the top of my head what that looks like, then again, I could reference some documentation. Oh, there's so many results though. Let me try AWS VPC. Oh, that's even more results. It's not a very good search.
Maybe
Well,
default.
I know it's going to be US underscore VPC. Now I'm going to give them a name to VPC. And because I don't like this search, I'm just going to Google search. Cool. So what do I need? I need a CIDR range. So let me add that inside my VPC. What else do I need? This is an optional, I don't know what this argument is, so I'm going to search it. It's optional. Looks like all of these are optional. Maybe I could just go ahead and leave it as is. So now if I try to run this again, it's going to yell at me again because it's specifically saying that a data resource, AWS underscore VPC, has not been declared. And that's what I'm pointing to here, right? So what I need to do otherwise is point to the resource like so. So I delete data and just now referencing the type of resource I want to use. And I'm using the name that I gave that resource as well. I don't know if you noticed, but see how that turned from gray to blue? If the name is wrong, your handy dandy Terraform extension should let you know, should give you some kind of indication. And if the name is correct and it matches, this is telling me, okay, cool. I see this resource somewhere inside of this configuration file. So now I can save and I could create this new VPC. Cool. And it's good to go. And if I run Terraform apply, oh, I want to run auto approve. It's going to prompt me. Next time I run apply, I'll show you auto approve. It's just an option to pass in, so it doesn't prompt you, and it should be created. Okay, so if we go over to our VPCs, let's see if we see our new VPC. Don't see it yet. I don't think this is, unless it's this one. I did name it, so I don't think it's this one. Oh, let's look at our outputs. So it says the apply is complete. All it really knows is these details. One thing we can do is, let's say, what do we want to learn here? We're trying to get, I don't know, maybe the ID of this, right? So I can use output, and I'm just going to call this VPC ID. Output is really just like, think of it as being the equivalent of print in Python or console log in JavaScript. This will just let me add detail that I may want to find out, right? So in this case, I want to know the ID of my VPC. So I'm going to say, not instance, what am I doing? VPC, and then the name of my VPC, and it's letting me tab autocomplete, and the name, or sorry, the ID. I'm going to hit save. I'm going to run Terraform apply again, and this time I'm just going to do auto approve. I think I could actually just do this with Terraform validate or plan actually. I don't need to. I don't think I need to do this with Terraform apply. Okay, so I ran my Terraform plan. It's basically like a dry run of apply, okay? So in this case, all I really wanted was an output. And now I know that my VPC ID is 0D93, blah, 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 because that's what I asked for. And now I can refresh here and use this ID to confirm whether or not this is the one that I created. And it is. Whatever reason, the name is not showing up. Oh, because I didn't give it a name. I gave my security group a name. Whoops. And that's how you use outputs. Okay. How's everyone doing? Am I throwing too much at you?
Yes.
I got a quick question.
Thumbs up.
For the
Did my
VPC,
thing just mute because I don't hear anyone? I haven't heard anyone all this time.
you might be muted, possibly.
Yeah,
Hear me?
I can
Hear
hear
me?
you.
Block, so I think you're talking.
I think everyone can hear everybody, but Elise can't hear us.
Yeah, I think
hilarious.
that's the case.
I don't know how long that's been happening, but yeah, for whatever reason, my Mac decided to mute me. Okay.
I have a question. On line 21,
Uh-huh.
my AWS_VPC is still grayed out, but if I click on it, it highlights the line 14 AWS VPC,
Can you share your screen?
so it knows that it's shorter. So I'm assuming, I mean, this means that, like, yeah, it's recognizing that they're the same thing, but it's not fully recognizing.
Okay, deselect it. Go to the name in the resource. Yeah, not that. That's the keyword. The thing that follows is the name. So demo to VPC. Let's try changing that.
To what?
Well, anything. I was just seeing if it would
Oh,
change. So why is it not finding it? That's the question. Because that looks like exactly what I have. PC underscore ID equals AWS underscore VPC dot demo to ID. Okay. Why don't you, yeah, just change it to what needs to be and then hit save and let's run Terraform plan.
that is init or apply.
Plan.
Okay.
Okay, so plan is like the dry run of apply, basically. Oh, do you see that?
Social security group demo it to. Oh, security spelled wrong.
Cool, and it changed color, right?
Perfect. Easy.
All right, let's run the plan again.
Can you scroll down to your port 80 ingress just so it can, I just want to make sure that I'm getting some errors and I'm not sure where.
Use.
Nice. Ooh, before you run apply, do one thing.
Change the ID.
No. All of that looks good. Inside of your terminal, type Terraform FMT, but don't hit enter yet. Okay, so look at these equal signs, right, for all of these details. Now hit enter on your command. Terraform FMT is a really neat little command that will just format your Terraform file, so it makes it all nice and pretty.
Is there a way to unformat it?
I don't, I don't think so. You could command Z to undo, maybe, inside of the code editor.
Ah, okay, cool.
So that's a nice little command too.
Interesting.
Okay, cool.
Cool.
So
Thank you.
your configuration worked. You should be able to run Terraform apply. That image does not exist.
Is it because I'm using the same one you used, so it's overlapping?
No. Let's see. Can we go back up to it? So what do you have? I have 0E2 C8C.
8?
Eight.
I put Bravo.
Oh, okay. And then the rest is well, Alpha 4, Bravo 6378. Yeah, the rest of that looks good. Cool. So now if your Terraform works, oh, There's one more thing, I guess. Oh, we've reached our limit.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. I need to.
Okay, now that it works, you know it works. Share my screen again so I could show you one more command and then break and open up breakout rooms. Okay, so done with this demo. We are done with these resources. So I'm going to now, I wanna get rid of all of this because I don't actually want it to exist. So I'm gonna run Terraform destroy. And it's essentially the opposite of Terraform plan. It's going to do exactly what it sounds like it's going to do. It's going to remove all of the instances you have configured. I'm going to say yes. Okay. This should work for the most part.
Sit. Wait.
All right, what was that?
That was Jeremy not being muted.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, this should work for the most part, but there may be some cases where, I don't know, things get messed up and it may not be able to destroy the resources you created. Again, it's more of like an edge case. It really only happens if you're trying to do some wonky stuff. But if that happens and when it happens, you could always ask us and we'll kind of go through it together. But if that happens, you'll just have to delete your state and reinitialize, and then you should be able to troubleshoot it from there. Okay. So now my resources are destroyed. If I go back to AWS, I no longer see that resource. Cool. So that is Terraform. You are gonna go over everything we went through in more detail throughout these next 2 weeks. And I will open up breakout rooms for you all to continue working on your assessments.
So Julius, Terraform basically does everything you do in AWS just in code without the GUI. That's what
Exactly.
it's for.
Exactly. Yes. Now you could also do everything you can in the UI without,
CLI, yeah.
yeah, exactly, exactly. But CLI, you still have to repeat those commands, right? Like you have to manually type them out or maybe copy paste them from a location. You could save those commands in like a bash script, but
So our assessment could all be done in Terraform.
yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe a future one will be.
Maybe. All right, cool. Let's break. I'll open up breakout rooms and prioritize your assessment over the challenge. But
Yeah, so anybody who's done and wants to flex their smarts on this assessment, can you like
I'm going to be in breakout room number 7. Not that anyone has to go to breakout room number 7, Mikhail. I'm just
yeah,
saying.
yeah. And some of the
Power
people who are already done and want to show us how
Captain
there.
Planet. But that's true too. Anybody else who wants to
Yeah.
join. I'm just saying,
Yeah.
like room
Yeah,
7.
yeah, I just want somebody to dumb it down for me because this is just too much.